Hey, it's another great day in the world and life of the Crotchety Old Men Podcast. Hi, I'm Gary Smith, one of the co-hosts of the Crotchety Old Men Podcast. And today we have all of us in the house, my main man George, and of course, Paul PC Clements. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to my brothers. How's it going, fellas?
Oh, definitely going well. I'm 6 feet above, which is about as tall as I'm ever going to get in this life. And all of you all know what that means. So I'm doing great.
Amen to that.
I just want to clarify something, or do I need to go back and edit it? Did you say you were 6 feet tall? Is that what you said?
I said I'm 6 feet above, 6 feet above, as in above ground.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure, man. I'm like, they tell me when you get older, you shrink, you don't grow. And I was like,
Yeah, well, I'm definitely shrinking.
Another 6 feet tall. Okay, all right. Well, as you can see, I'm good. I'm having a great time already, man. You just made my day. You made me laugh.
No, for us to be so jolly, it certainly doesn't sound like we're crotchety, does it?
Well, after we introduce this subject today, they may think we're crotchety.
All right. Well, speaking of subjects, George, what are we talking about today?
Smitty, just being in line with, it's important to laugh every day. It's also important to, and I'll say it like this in air quotes, is to stay regular every day. So, what may be regular for me may not be regular for you, but, you've got to make sure that, you do that as we were in kids. Did you do number one or number two? So you want to make sure you're doing number two every day. So, I was reading this article the other day, and it was saying our fiber enriched foods the same as taking a fiber supplement. And I thought that was pretty interesting. That was what made me think that, with our holistic expert here, Mr. PC, that it'd be a good subject to talk about. Because here again, it's a subject that people don't want to touch. They don't want to talk about. Me, talking about that kind of thing. So, let's open it up and let's attack this subject and talk about it.
All right.
Yeah, well, George, you mentioned a very good thing about the fact that we don't like to talk about ooey gooey subjects. And I think that's a matter of course in our society as well. But there's a lot to be said about your poop and what it does for you and what it indicates for you as well. So let me start by giving you a backdrop. When we digest food, for it to clear our intestine totally, we have to consider that takes 10 to 73 hours. Okay, so what are we doing in between that? Okay, so George, as you mentioned, the fiber helps tremendously, because what fiber does is as it runs through the intestine, it scratches that intestine and it pulls out toxins. It pulls out old poop that is stuck to the lining of the intestine. And so fiber is extremely important in the diet. As you mentioned, as you increase your dietary food intake by adding more fiber to it, that helps that process that much better.
Well said. Well said. And it comes down to, sometimes we have issues with that. And so here, back to the article I was reading, they were saying that if you take a dietary supplement, there's really, well, let me back up. There's really no answer, yes or no, to that question. Is fiber or the dietary supplements, either one, any better? Because of the fact that it depends on the situation. If you're taking the dietary supplement for a particular situation, I mean you're constipated or something like that, then yes, that is probably a good remedy for that particular situation. But as PC alluded to, you want something that's going to keep you regular on a regular basis. And by your intake of fiber type foods, you also get other, benefits. For example, if you eat blueberries, which are high in fiber content, it also has good minerals that will help you in other areas, your immune system and things like that. So that's the importance of, eating fiber enriched foods on a daily basis. Salads, strawberries, bananas, those types of things, help. If I'm not mistaken, almonds also are really high in this category also. So yeah, I mean, it's important that that we have the right, especially at our age, that we have the right diet. Sometimes it's better to reach for that can of almonds as opposed to that package of cookies. When we're watching the Olympics or whatever we're doing, because it's better for us.
You're absolutely right, George. And you made an interesting point about at our age, because at our age, we're slowing down. We're not as active as we used to be. Some of us have a very sedentary lifestyle and whatnot. And so when you're eating, you're sitting on this food without starting a process by where the food is moving. Okay. Second thing is, the food that we're eating right now is mass produced, which means that there's a lot of fiber, there's a lot of nutrients that are missing in the food altogether. So what happens is when you have a situation like that where you're constantly eating these processed foods, they bulk up in your intestine and they stay there, and they can cause anything from diverticulitis, which is a situation by where the food that's stuck to the lining of your intestine perforates and pushes through the intestine so that it creates space for the rest of the flow to go through. Okay, that can cause cancer. So we have to be careful about the things that we eat. We have to think in terms of alternatives, as you mentioned, supplements for fiber and supplements for nutrients as well. Okay.
So I guess the old adage or the saying that I've heard, because the kid at an apple a day will keep the doctor away, so to speak. And
Absolutely.
I believe, and correct me here if I'm wrong, that I think George mentioned a lot of the fruits, and I know apples is one of them. Certainly as a fiber, but in terms of other things that have fiber, such as your vegetables, greens, I believe. I'm not certain on this because I'm not a dietitian by no means. Um, but I know that in some of your beans and things of that nature, we're going back pretty much to eat the earth, with fruits and vegetables and nuts and berries and things like that. I believe from the beginning of time, dietary, um, let's say, menu, if you will, was shared with us by the Almighty Creator. And so, not that I'm ascribing to vegetarianism and things of that nature, but just being mindful, I think, is what we're all saying of what you put into your body, because obviously what you put in maybe not necessarily always comes out, to your point, PC, because some of the processed foods and some of the other, especially sweets and sugars and things of that nature, probably works in the reverse to us having that regularity that you're talking about. So I say all that to say, tell me more about, especially about how we can all, whether you're 80 or 8, be regular. I mean, certainly with exercise, I'm sure that's probably easier for younger people, but I don't know. There might be some younger folks out there that maybe don't know it yet, but they're about to attract or whatever some of those diseases or discomforts in the body a buildup. Because we all know that this thing doesn't just happen overnight. So, PC, take it away.
All right, here we go. So we talked about the added benefits of dietary supplements for fiber and nutrition and so forth. You're absolutely right, Smitty, in terms of what we've been eating for a long time, and what we're going to face as people get older. So let's look at a couple of things. Let's look at poop, for instance. And poop tells you a whole lot about where your body is at that particular time. Number one, you want to take into consideration when you go to the doctor what he's telling you about what your health is at that particular time and what to do for that. Second thing is, when we look at our poop, what are we looking for? We're looking for size. We're looking for the shape of the poop. We're looking for the color of the poop. We're looking for whether the poop comes out in a nice roll, or whether it's coming out in little nuggets or whatever the case might be. All of these things really tell you exactly where your health is. So if I may, let me start. There's a chart, and for those of you that are interested in delving into this matter a little thicker, there's what you call the Bristol stool chart. And the Bristol stool chart goes into these very things that I'm talking to you about now. The color of the poop and what that means, the shape and size of the poop and what those things mean, the texture of the poop, and what that might mean. So let's look at some of the things that the chart talks about. You got the number one type is separate and hard lumps like little nuts that come out, and that happens occasionally when we are overly constipated. And the reason we're overly constipated because number one, we may not be drinking enough water. Other factors that regarding constipation may relate to what kind of health your digestive system is in. And when we talk about digestive system, we're talking about everything from the esophagus straight on down to the stomach. So what you might be think is going on in your chest or whatever the case might be, part of that is your esophagus and part of your digestive system. Okay, so let's look at number two. Number two is a sausage like a roll, but it's lumpy. This is especially if it's brown. It's extremely normal. And then you have the sausage type number three that have cracks in it. That's extremely normal. Then you have a sausage like smooth texture. Now that begins to tell you that you have a lot of mucus in your system. And the reason why we have mucus in our system, that's our body's natural way of clearing out toxins. And the toxins go through the intestine. And with this buildup of toxins in the intestine, it can cause some serious digestive issues. Okay. Number five, soft blobs. Then that indicates that there's something going on in your digestive system. It indicates inflammation. When you have flat as opposed to round sausage-like stools, that means that there is some kind of there's something in the way of the canal. You might have hemorrhoids. You may not be drinking enough water, and as a result of not drinking enough water, which is key, because it blows up the intestine, and there's a easy track for everything to flow through. So if you're not drinking enough water, what happens is the intestine shrinks, okay, and it creates impasses for food and toxins as well. Okay, so these are some of the shapes that we're looking at, and quite naturally it tells you a lot about what's going on. You know, a lot of the shapes, especially when you have lumpy poops, you know, indicates your lack of water consumption. So these are a lot of the things in the Bristol stool chart that tells you about what to look for. And that I would suggest everybody, when you sit down on the toilet and you finish doing what you're doing, you get up and take a look at your stuff and see what your body's trying to tell you, because your body's trying to tell you something. And that's the thing that people don't get. They don't get this. Pain tells your body something you need to be doing differently. Well, your stool does the same thing. It tells you, you know, what condition your body is in and what conditions may be present that's in your body.
Oh, good stuff, man. Good stuff. You know, having read some of those same articles and things, Paul, I've just come, no pun intended, regular in terms of paying attention to those things. And primarily as you start to get older, but I started doing it years ago because I think it was a book called Floaters and Sinkers or something to that nature. and it's probably still out there or not. And it kind of tells you something about what's going on with your body as well, whether or not your poop sinks versus float. It's been so long ago since I've read it. I don't know which one is the best. Is it supposed to float or sink? But there's a story in that situation. So now let's take it a bit further, though. I'm talking about diet, the intake of water. I got to believe that exercise plays a part or role in this as well. But now, when the things that we look for is to know that our stool is, as you say, perfect or whatever. But there's some things, and as you mentioned about colorization. Now, obviously, I know sometimes if you eat spaghetti, the outcome is going to be somewhat of a reddish or I don't know, orange, whatever color, depending upon, I guess, how much tomato sauce was put in there. But can you give us a little more depth on that about far as the colorization of things that we should, I know you may not be able to do a diagnosis. We're not asking you to do that here on the podcast. But what are some of the things that we should be aware of in terms of color?
Good point. Good point. Because first of all, let me start by this, since we're talking about color. Food dyes. They put food dyes in everything. And they put food dyes in everything, not for your health, not for your benefit, but to sell the food. Okay. So we've got a society that has genuflected to the God of profit, to the detriment of our bodies and our health. So what happens is when you have things like tomato sauce, they put red dyes and purple dyes in that. When you eat meat, they're putting red dyes and purple dyes and blue dyes in the meat. So what that does is that colors or discolors the poop when we come out. Okay. And we want to pay attention to that because we don't want to absorb a lot of dyes. And I'll tell you why, because we're melanated people. Those dyes will disrupt the natural light flow within us. And melanin is nothing but light energy is what that is. So when you've got a blockage of ultraviolet light that comes into your body because of the foods that we eat, then your pineal gland is not operating at the optimum level, and you need another charge. But let's get back to the coloration of poop. Poop normally is brown, and there can be variations of brown. Brown is normal. When it gets dark brown, that might be due, or greenish, a dark greenish color. That's due, a lot of times my poop gets like that when I eat a lot of green vegetables like collard greens. Cabbage doesn't do it necessarily, but everything in the green family darkens my poop, and it darkens most people's poop. Okay. You mentioned the colorations or discolorations like reddish. Usually, reddish relates to inflammation that's in the body that has nothing to do with the foods that we eat, and it also indicates the fact that we're eating foods with these dyes. And for us African Americans, for us melanated people, should I say, and that's all around the world, when you're eating foods with dyes in them, it blocks the light energy that comes from the sun that's transmitted through the pineal gland that gives us the energy and our God likeness. So you want to stay away from dyed foods. What are dyed foods? They use dyed colors, like I was saying, in meat. Blue, red, and purple dyes. They use blue, red, and purple dyes for the tomatoes, or the tomato sauces that they put the tomatoes in. So there are a lot of foods that you got to look on your food labels and look to see what kind of dyes are available. Foods that are genetically altered. Corn, for instance, is one of the most genetically altered foods on the planet. They put a virus in that corn so that the corn would be more easily digestible to us. But what they don't know is what that virus does to our bodies. So that creates some inflammation, and that can discolor the poop as well. Then you have poop that's black. Black poop indicates that there's bleeding somewhere. There's bleeding somewhere in the intestine. There's bleeding somewhere in the stomach. That's transformed into your poop. It comes out black, and you have this smell of iron which definitely indicates that you're bleeding internally from somewhere, and you need to go to a specialist to look at that right away because you don't want to keep bleeding. Okay. Greenish poop. Greenish poop means that some of your food is passing through. The poop is passing through so fast through the digestive system that it doesn't have a chance to absorb all the digestive processes that take place that start from the pancreas to the liver and so on and so forth. Okay, so you want to be mindful of these foods, and a lot of these foods that pass through so quickly through your system are processed foods.
Paul,
Okay, because it takes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Interject real quick before I forget. I did mention about that floater sinker deal. Could you
Right.
on that? Which is best? Which is it? What's the indication?
Good question. Good question. Because you and I had this discussion a couple years ago in a friend of ours' backyard. But good question. So if poop is floating, okay, and most people were the medical community was under the opinion that floating poop was healthy poop, but actually floating poop indicates that there's too much fiber in the system and it floats and doesn't go to the bottom. Okay, your healthiest poop is poop that goes to the bottom because not only is it fibrous, but it's also got nutrients in the poop as well that wasn't processed during the digestive process, which takes, by the way, several hours. Okay, so the poop that's floating may have the fiber, but doesn't have the nutrients that weigh the poop down and make it float down into the toilet. Does that answer your question, Smith?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It definitely does because you want to know what if your poop is floating too much, then obviously you need to cut back on, I guess, fiber or what have you. And if you're sinking, I would imagine that okay, you must be in a pretty decent situation. Talked about the importance of water and exercise and stuff like that. Now, um, there's a reason why sometimes when you have a movement that it is so strong that you can't stay in the bathroom with yourself, and then there's other times when you got people like, well, my poop don't stink, and so I've experienced both. So,
I'm sure you have, my brother.
I'm from the opinion of the latter. My poop don't stink. So,
well, mine either. That's why we crotchety, and that's why we old men. But smell is important as well, and the Bristol chart really spells all of this out. They talk about food coloring. They talk about the structure of the bowel movement, and smell is also important. So let's talk about smell, for instance. Smell, poop usually normally by all human indicators doesn't smell good. Okay. So if you have a poop that normally doesn't smell good, then okay, that's good. But now let's say the smell changes and the smell is bad. Okay. Then that indicates that something has transpired in your body that's not getting the proper amount of breakdown. Okay. And it comes out rancid. It's almost like garbage that sits in a garbage can for a long time and you get that rancidy smell. And we as United States Americans, we eat a lot of meat, and meat is acidic. And so what it does is raise the acidic value in your body instead of having a pH level of 7 or above. And I'm not going to go into the pH values at this particular juncture. However, what I will say is this, is that the more acidic environment that your body is in internally, then you're going to get those bad smells. Okay. Or there might be something even more acute that's going on in your body that'll create a bad smell. You might have a digestive disorder that needs to be looked at by a doctor. And so these are all the things that would be indicative of whether you're healthy, whether you need to go see a doctor or even a specialist, to really go in there and really probe. Generally, I tell people, especially people that are melanated, they tell you to do a scope every 10 years. Well, because of our DNA and the difference between our DNA and the model that they use, which is a white man, those things are different. So we need to do things a little more proactively than others, and that's primarily because of our DNA and the way it's structured. Okay, so instead of doing a intestinal scope in 10 years, you may want to do it in 5, especially if you've had colon cancer running through the family. So colonoscopies are not uncommon to do at 5 years. All the doctor needs to do is tell the insurance company that he detected some blood in the urine, and you're off to the races. Um, when you have a greenish looking stool, that indicates that there's not enough water, and as a result of having not enough water, you're constipated. And people think because you're constipated, you don't pass any stool at all. Well, that's not necessarily true. You can pass stools when you're constipated. You can pass you can it's like diarrhea. People think that diarrhea is a runny kind of thing. But before diarrhea gets runny, diarrhea is actually has a hardening surface to it initially. Before it gets to be runny, that's when it gets worse. Okay, so the greenery indicates that, especially if it's light green or a yellowish, that there's some constipation in your system, and so you need to look at uh, eating some fiber. You need to look at eating some things that'll create a purging, so to speak, so that you can get that out of there. Because as you're constipated, there are toxins in that stool that builds up in your colon and it sticks to the colon, and that's something you really don't want.
Hey, that's all good information. So as we wrap this up, I just had one other question. So that when you go for a physical, the doctor usually gives you that little card, and then I think there's a commercial on TV, Cologuard or something. What
Right.
is that really? Because that, here again, that's only once a year, and I don't want people to be under a false impression of what's actually going on here. But what is that? What is it actually looking for, and what is that actually doing?
Actually, it's looking for that's a very good point, George. What that Cologuard does is it takes a sample of your stool and ships it to a clinic, a laboratory. And what they're looking for blood in the stool. They're looking for the DNA composition of that stool, and to find out if there are any adverse DNA products in the stool, such as colon cancer, such as diverticulitis, such as celiac disease. All of these have indicators, and they pick up those indicators in that stool. Now, that does not satisfy the fact that if your doctor is concerned about whether you have cancer or not, you still have to go through that colonoscopy, which is a scope. They put you to sleep, of course, and it's a scope that goes right through your colon, and it looks at whether you have diverticulum, which creates diverticulitis, um, whether you have a cancerous cell in the colon or whatever. So there are two very different ways of looking at um, digestive and colon tract disease in your body, George. And that's a good point. I'm glad you asked that.
Well, absolutely. So, hey guys, it's been some good information shared here. Hopefully, our listeners will take advantage of that and actually go to that chart that PC mentioned, and make sure they're good health, because that's what we're all here about here on the Crotchety Old Men. Is not only, like we've said before, it's good to be financially fit, but without your health, you really have nothing. So, with that said, what kind of words of wisdom we got to take us home with I see Smitty smiling, so I'm assuming he's got something over there written down. What you got, Smitty?
Well, I'm going back to my old mainstay, John Maxwell. And it's just a quote that goes something like this. Life is like riding in a taxi. Whether you're going anywhere or not, the meter is always ticking.
I like that. I like that, Smitty. Clever, brother. Clever.
And with that said, if you didn't know,
Now you know.
Peace. Take care.
Peace.